Alright, welcome back everybody. My name's Mr. Swaner, and today we're going to talk about graphing linear equations using slope-intercept form. This is a very special form that makes graphing lines very, very easy. Before we begin, make sure you pick up your companion notes so that you can follow along with this presentation. Well, let's start off with talking about slope and intercept. And we know that the slope of the line is kind of the shape that it takes, but we haven't really talked about the intercept. And the intercept we're talking about is the y-intercept. And that happens when our graph crosses the y-axis, our up and down axis. And this happens when the value of x is equal to 0. So let's show algebraically how we can find our y-intercept, and that occurs when x equals 0. So if I plug in 0 for x in our equation y equals 1/2 x plus 2, I have 1/2 times 0. Anything times 0 is 0. And what's left? Now I have 0 plus 2, so y is just simply equal to 2. And that is where our graph is going to cross the y-axis. So that is our y-intercept. And so plus 2 is our y-intercept. That's where our graph crosses. So I'm going to go ahead and make a point at the y-intercept of 2. So when x equals 0, y equals 2, you see the point graph there at 0, 2. And then my next step is to take a look at the slope. Remember, slope is rise over run. My slope is 1 over 2, so that means from that point I'm going to rise 1 and run 2. This is going to be a positive slope. So from that point at 0, 2 that I just made, my y-intercept, I'm going to rise 1 and then I'm going to run 2 to get to my next point. And I'm going to do that a couple of times here on the right side. See that I rise 1 and run 2 to get to each next point. And I can do kind of the opposite to go in reverse. So instead of rising 1 and running 2, I'm going to go down 1 and back 2. And I want you to see that that pattern just kind of continues. So we need to get several points on our line just to make sure that our line has a very good shape. And then once we have followed our slope on each side, we can go ahead and draw in our line. So this line is the graph of 1/2 x plus 2. Let's take a look at another one here. Now I have y equals 2/5 x plus 1. So we should be looking at our slope, and that's rise 2, run 5. And then our y-intercept is at plus 1. So our graph is going to cross our y-axis at 1. So I'm going to make my first point at y equals 1 on my y-intercept, and then from that point I'm going to use my slope to draw the rest of my graph. So from the point that I plotted, because my slope says rise 2, run 5, I'm going to go up 2, and then I'm going to go to the right 5 and make my next point. And I can do that in reverse. I'm just going to go from my y-axis, my y-intercept. Instead of going up 2, to go backwards, I'm going to go down 2 and left 5. And just kind of continue the pattern in the opposite direction. And then I can draw my line through. And that is a perfect y equals 2/5 x plus 1. Okay, let's look at y equals 3x. Now, we've been looking for my y-intercept, and that's our first point that we plot. But you'll see here I have y equals 3x and then nothing. So my y-intercept, we could speculate that it is plus 0. So if you don't have anything after your x term here, that's just plus 0. So my graph is going to cross at 0, 0 at the origin. And then I'm going to use my slope to graph the rest of my line. But I don't have a rise over run, I just have one number. Well, remember that if you see just a single number standing alone, that it can be interpreted as that number over 1. So the number 3 is the exact same thing as 3 over 1. So I'm going to use that 3 over 1 as my rise over run. So I'm going to rise 3 and run 1. So from this point at 0, 0, I'm going to rise 3 and run 1. And that'll give me my point. And I can do that again. I'm just going to rise 3 and run 1. and then I'm going to look to do it backwards. So from my point at the origin, instead of going up 3, I'm going to go down 3 and back 1, and then down 3 and back 1 again. And that gives me a really good picture and several points to draw my line through. And there I have my graph of y equals 3x. Okay, now I have y equals 1/3 x minus 2. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to look at my y-intercept. Where is my graph going to cross? In this case, it's going to cross at -2. So my line is going to cross my graph at -2. I need to put my first point at y equals -2, and then I'm going to use my slope to get the rest of my points. My slope is rise 1, run 3. So I'm going to go up 1 and over 3. And then I can do up 1 over 3 again. And then to go backwards, I'm going to go down 1 and back 3 to continue my pattern. And after that, I can draw my line. And I have my graph. Well, let's take a look at some negative slopes. So now I have y equals -2/3 x plus 1. I'm going to be looking at my y-intercept, which is 1. So my graph is going to cross at +1. I can put my point in. And then I need to be really careful to notice this negative in my slope. So I have a negative rise, which means I'm going to be going down 2 instead of up 2 for my line. So here's my slope. I just have to make sure that I remember this is a -2/3, and when I'm done, my graph should look like a negative graph. So from my point at the y-intercept, I'm going to go down 2 because it's negative, and then right 3. And then I can do one more. Again, I just went down 2 and right 3, and then to continue the pattern backwards from my y-axis, I'm going to go up 2 and back 3, and then up 2 and back 3. Now I have my points, I can draw my line, and I am all finished. Let's take a look at another negative slope, and this one has a negative y-intercept. So I'm going to start at -1 on the y-axis. So I put my point at -1, and now I need to find my slope. My slope is -2, but I feel like I'm missing one value. Remember that if I have a standalone number, -2 is the same as -2 over 1. So now I have a rise of -2 and a run of 1. Let's be very careful that we make sure to include our negative. So I'm going to follow my slope because it's a -2 over 1. I'm going to go down 2 and right 1. And then I can go down 2 and right 1 again. And then down 2 and right 1 again. And if I had a much larger graph, I could do this forever. And we're going to go ahead and do it in the reverse direction. So instead of going down, I'm going to go up 2 and back 1. Up 2 and back 1, up 2 and back 1. And my graph is ready to go. Draw my line through, and I'm all done. Just have a couple more examples for you here. Y equals -4. Well, in this example, we don't have any x's at all. But we do have y equals -4, and that tells me where my y-intercept is. So I can put my point at y equals -4. And again, we have 0x. So it doesn't really matter what x is. For x is anything, y equals -4. So if x is 1, y equals -4. There is no slope here. So again, if x is 1, y is -4. If x is 2, y is -4. If x is 3, y is -4. So on and so forth. So for 4, 5, 6, if x is 100, y is equal to -4. And I can do the same thing backwards. If x is -1, y is equal to -4. If x is -2, y is -4. So on and so forth. So now I have my points, and I should end up with a line that has 0 slope, or no slope. So let's look at another one just like that. I have y equals 3, so I do have my y-intercept, but I have no x's to go along with it. So y equals 3 if x is 0, y equals 3 if x is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, a million, a billion, a trillion. And in the negative direction, y is equal to 3 if x is -1, or -2, or -3, or -1 billion. So we're going to have a straight line that goes on and on forever at y equals 3. And our last little example here is x equals 1, and it's the exact opposite of when we have y equals a number. We're saying x is equal to 1. So I'm going to put a point at x equals 1. And in this case, x equals 1 for everything. X is always equal to 1. So I can draw a straight line up and a straight line down. X is always equal to 1, so it will go straight up and down forever and ever and ever. So here's just your last example doing the same exact thing. X is equal to -4 in this instance. So I'm going to plot a point at x equals -4. And x is always going to be -4 no matter what y is. So I can draw a line straight up and a line straight down, connect my points, and there's my graph of x equals -4. Again, this example and the last example are undefined. So in closing, in your own words, how do you graph in slope-intercept form? As you were watching in the video, what I did is the first thing I did is I plotted the y-intercept. That was the first thing I did, and from that y-intercept I used the slope to find all of my other points. So you're going to plot the y-intercept and then use the slope to make the rest of your graph. Your graph. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Mr. Swaner, and until next time, study hard and keep practicing.